We're live. Friends, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ranjit Andipu, and today we have Adam Reed as part of our Pioneers and Changemakers interview series. In this interview series, we bring people from all around the world working in the waste management and circular economy sector to who are creating change and who are pioneering change. So Adam has been a long-time contributor of BWasteWise. He's been our advisor and has advised us through various challenges and really helped us get here today. And he's also working with SUEZ. Well, that's his daytime. He works with SUEZ UK, daytime job. He works with SUEZ UK, and has been there for about less than a year now, so it's an interesting role. We'll hear a lot about that. So yeah, let me welcome Adam Reed to the interview. Adam, welcome again to the
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, Ranjit, and I'm a long-term supporter of BWasteWise and you. And apologies for having missed a session a couple of weeks ago, but all is well now.
Great, wonderful. Adam, could you tell us a little bit about your role at SUEZ?
Yeah, I think I've got one of those really lucky roles, and people often complain when they hear what I get to do for a living. But I've spent 25 years in the waste industry, waste and resources industry. I used to be an academic. I spent a couple of years in local government, so I've kind of I've seen the system from a number of vantage points. I then spent 18 years as a consultant. And I love the answering the question and supporting a myriad of clients. But what I found was that your advice would come and go, and people may or may not take it. And then I got a phone call out of the blue, and the CEO at SUEZ said, "We're looking for an external affairs director, and you're the man we're interested in." So it didn't take me long to say yes, because an external affairs role is communications, it's engagement, it's the opportunity to lobby government. I sit on working groups and share experience and learn from others, and then bring it back to SUEZ and see how that might fit with some of our operational and business development agenda. So I don't have a team. I don't have much of a budget. I get to commission some research, but I get to talk about rubbish quite a lot, and I do enjoy that. So I'm a lucky guy.
So you're saying you're the talk shop at SUEZ without doing much work, Adam? No work?
I do plenty of work, but most of it involves engagement, liaison, and discussion, as opposed to writing reports or managing staff. So it's a different type of work to the one I'm used to.
Great. So let's get into discussing some key points. There's a lot happening in waste management and circular economy in Europe, and once upon a time, Europe, UK. So tell us a little bit about that. And I just also want to mention that my colleagues in Europe tell me that I'm on the wrong side of the Atlantic to be in this sector. So talk to me a little bit about what's happening in UK and then in Europe.
Well, unfortunately, we're drifting away from Europe at a rapid pace. Brexit negotiations are ongoing, and now we've got things like movement of people sorted to some degree. We're starting to look at some of the other sectors and interactions, and this is one of the big uncertainties for UK PLC: is how will we interact with a common market, and what will happen with tariffs and levies on materials and products and possibly waste streams that historically have been sent all around Europe for processing or for use as a fuel. That's an uncertainty that I'm not sure we're going to see the end of anytime soon. I mean, Europe continues to drive forward with high recycling rates. It also continues to expand with new countries joining the community, and I think that creates a really interesting dynamic, because you've got, how do we recycle even more of the stuff we've got in those developed economies, and how do we generate heat and power and electricity, which so many of them are prevalent on. The combined heat and power systems are so core to much of northern and central European behaviour. Yet with changing compositions, changing policy agendas, some of that infrastructure is now almost reliant on UK export of SRF and RDF and other type materials. So there could be an interesting, transition as we start to take less material overseas, because the cost of tariffs may prohibit it, and those plants may start to close because they just haven't got the feedstock. So Europe's interesting, but on the other hand, new accession countries and more of the developing East and Southern European, it may be that they really want to start buying some of the material that historically we've sent overseas, because it would be a perfect feedstock for their developing resource recovery systems and sites. So very interesting European market, very fluid, still heavily based on high recycling and on energy recovery. Now the UK, well, the UK is just more interesting day by day. Part Brexit, we've mentioned it, but if you look at what's going on with a new government environment strategy that was released in January, we've now got the DEFRA, that's the Environment Department, resources and waste strategy, because resources are now more important than waste, finally, in UK legislative terms. That will be released in November or December. And that should set the agenda for a significant change in the way that we do things. So we're talking about a latte levy, so a levy on your coffee cups. We're talking about deposit return systems that may look something like a Norwegian or Swedish approach. We're talking about potentially banning single-use plastics, or at least making them prohibitively expensive. We're talking about recycling rates that will be higher than the circular economy package from Europe. So there's a lot going on at the moment, but 6 months from now we'll know more. And my job is partly about lobbying for some of that and helping work through what happens if and how could that work, and logistically could your MRFs or your infrastructure sort that material. So very interesting times in the UK, but no definite answers other than change is inevitable, and I would expect recycling and recovery to be higher profile, just as the circular economy is, than ever before in cross-government, cross-departmental debates. So that's good news for those of us in the sector.
All right, slightly personal and cultural question. You're using the word lobbying, as if it's not a bad word. At least from the US. I mean, if you use the same word here, you'd be looked down upon. So can you talk to us about the role that you play and, how you're perceived in that culture? Yeah.
Lobbying is a word I would have never used in a consultancy environment. I mean, we answered questions and helped provide robust evidence and debate. We would never be, knocking on government's door and suggesting something. My role is not lobbying in the American sense of the word, though. So I act as an interface between government, trade bodies. So in Europe, you've got FAAD. In the UK, you've got the ESA, you've got CIWM. So bodies that represent professionals or trade associations, and SUEZ as a corporate entity. So I get to engage in debates about how would a deposit scheme work. I get to consider issues like what level should a tax be. We're then presenting reports together with other industry stakeholders to government that might outline some of the solutions they might want to consider in their thinking. So I'm not knocking on the minister's door suggesting that he needs to get a refillable coffee cup anytime soon. But through social media, I'm certainly giving the minister a nudge in the right direction when she does the right thing, and when she's seen to be promoting those principles that we would all like to see of recycling, recovery, and ultimately prevention. So it's a bit nudge, it's a bit communications, it's a bit joining of dots at the SUEZ end, and ensuring that the sector is getting sound, robust advice from somebody that used to look at the sector from an external vantage point, and now has the benefit of having all of that operational capability that I can tap into and source information from. So hopefully it's a sharing role, a caring role, and one that might nudge us in a good direction. But lobbying's a word with many different meanings, Ranjith.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Adam. So let's talk about the big question that everyone's talking about. And we spoke about this yesterday with Antonis and David Biderman of SWANA. They spoke about the China import restrictions, or some call it the China ban. Can you talk about its impact on UK and the contamination rates there?
Yeah, national sword, to give it its proper title. That sounds very grand, doesn't it? A squeezing of the specification for mixed papers, and a banning of all post-consumer plastics, which is pretty tough when you consider most of the plastics in the UK are post-consumer. What does it mean for us? Well, SUEZ, we acted early. Back in April last year, we knew this was coming. The noises were coming. We weren't sure about the level of restriction, but we knew there was going to be a change. And so we started to source both UK, European, and more novel overseas markets as part of our portfolio. So when the ban came in, we didn't have to react, and suddenly, everybody was scrabbling for less of the market that was now available. So we acted early. But what's the impact on the UK as a whole? Well, you're seeing a couple of things. Prices are dropping because there's more material than there is market available. So what we're finding is that there's an increase in quality as all of us try and ensure that the quality of the products, HDPE, PET, mixed plastics, mixed paper, etc., can meet the specifications of the new markets that we're engaging with and constantly satisfying demand for. So at our MRFs, for example, you might see extra manpower being used to do those quality checks and to pick off any extra contaminants. We might slow the belt slightly to ensure that we're not allowing too much of the target materials to get through into the residue. And we're constantly checking bales of material that come in. So they're sending us less and less of the stuff we want and more of the stuff we don't want. We're not miracle workers in this, Murph. It's not alchemy. We can only process what you send us. So we're giving feedback up the chain, and equally we sample the stuff going out the back end, so we know, whether it's good enough to meet certain markets or whether we're going to be sending it to lower value second or tertiary markets. So we've upped our game, as has the entire UK. We've had to get more focused on quality. We've had to get more focused on attention to detail, and we've had to explore alternative markets. It was too easy for the UK for too long to know that China would take 60% of our material. That was going to come to an end one day. It just happened a bit too soon for particularly the smaller and the medium-sized players who don't necessarily have the reach and remit that the big brands like Viridor, Veolia, SUEZ have, for example. We in huge commodity markets, and perhaps we've been a little bit protected by that, which has been handy. But at the moment, the consumer's not feeling the pain. I don't think my gran or my mum are worrying when they're down the aisle in the supermarket too much about which plastics they're buying. But the attention, the media, the press, TV documentaries, I've never seen anything like it in our sector. And that means the consumers are seeing the ramifications of China, even if they weren't aware of what was happening in China. And I think that can only be good for the quality of the material that we receive at our plants, and ultimately the quality of material that's going back into the economy. So I think it's going to be good long term. If I'm honest, I'd like to think it's going to drive greater investment in UK infrastructure. New markets for some of those materials, biofuels, aviation fuels, maybe proteins for animal feed. We could be looking at sugars and starches to go back into pharmaceuticals. They're all technologies that could be given a stimulus because we now got to stop relying on external export. So ultimately, I think it could be a good thing, and with government strategy on its way, you'd like to think they can join the dots, and we can see a really progressive UK economy fueled by the consumers and brands that are based in the UK.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Adam. That's really comprehensive. I have a lot of questions flying around, so I'll try to slow them down and put maybe one by one. We don't have much time. We have just 15 minutes, friends. You're watching Adam Reed on Be Waste-Wise Pioneers and Changemakers interview series. We have a pioneer and changemaker join us every week. And next week, we'll have Kyle Weens, who's been a hero in the repair movement, the right to repair movement. I think you should definitely join us next week, too. I have so many questions for Adam. So, but before we get into that, I'll actually put to him a question that we got via email from Jim Rice. Jim Rice runs the One More Generation, a nonprofit organization, which is run by Carter and Olivia Rice, the two young teenagers. And they've been also part of our Global Dialogue on Waste last year. Check them out. But Jim asks Adam, which of the 7 types of plastics are actually being recycled in the UK? In the US, plastics number 3, number 6, number 7 are deemed to be cost prohibitive to recycle. So they are merely thrown away. And which is why One More Generation is advocating in the US so that people would stop buying products made of those plastics, number 3, number 6, and number 7. Could you talk to us about what's happening in the UK?
Well, I'm a big fan of theirs and the work they've been doing, so it's fantastic. And I think what's interesting is that HDPE, milk bottles, for example, very good, strong market value. 350, 400 pounds per ton. So absolutely want those. PET, your Coca-Cola, your drinks bottles, your Evian bottles. Yeah, you can get 150 pound a ton for a clean stream, and we want that as well. And then you've got a mixture of pots, tubs, and trays. Less of a market. Some authorities are still keen to collect it. We can find end markets, but you're starting to get into the realms of only just viable. Now, we've got an outlet for plastic films, but that's not a UK solution. That happens to be a very localized SUEZ solution. There's not a lot of money in it, but it's working for us at the moment. But, beyond that, we're not really targeting other materials in the UK, and rightly so, because they're just contaminating the loads we're getting. And so many people are putting out black plastic trays, thinking that we can recycle them. I'm still yet to find a piece of equipment in any MRF in my portfolio that can source, that can segregate black. If we could, the market value of them is nigh on, 0. So that's a material we're trying to encourage people not to put out for recycling. So one of our messages to residents when we get the opportunity is target materials only. Don't think it's plastic, it's recyclable. Because recyclability is, as you say, Ranjit, it's not just about being able to segregate it and keep it clean. There's got to be an end use drawing that material through. And for some of these materials, it just isn't there at the moment. So we're similar to the US in that respect.
Great. Friends, black material is really troublesome in MRFs because MRFs generally use optical sorting to identify which plastic they're looking at so that they could move it around. But when you put black color on the resin, it makes it impossible for the optical sorter to understand what kind of material it is. So that's a big problem. But Adam, I have really a lot of questions, but I think the one that I'll put to you is, as you mentioned that you're looking at novel markets, you're looking at Eastern European markets. And there have been many commentators have been mentioning that if something like that happens, maybe these new markets might not have the environmental regulations to deal with these issues, or they might not have the capacity. But capacity, I think it could be developed, but environmental regulations, it's much more not predictable. So could you talk to us about, as someone, as on behalf of SUEZ, how are you thinking about this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, before I joined SUEZ, I was a consultant that worked on developing economies for 15 years. And so I've seen the failures of technology and innovation in places that just weren't ready for them. And so, yeah, I'm very conscious that, we need to be careful about where we expand into. And one of the interesting things about SUEZ is we have international development teams who are doing due diligence on markets around the world to understand whether there's a short-term or a long-term opportunity and just what materials they're going to want and what quality they're going to expect. So we don't take entering a new market for our materials lightly, because our reputation is built on being good at what we do and doing quality material. The last thing we need is materials that we've collected from a UK authority ending up in a beach in Nigeria or in a landfill cell in Singapore. That's the kind of thing that, that just destroys trust. So the amount of due diligence we do is quite scary, and we wouldn't react quickly to any new opportunity until we've really kicked it and tested it.
All right, wonderful. That helps. Adam, also, could you talk to us? I mean, you've been a consultant for the best part of your life, and now you're in a new role. But throughout your life, you've been working in the waste management sector. So, can you talk to us about? Can you tell us what's the change that you're looking at? What's the time frame? I mean, we've talked to many commentators earlier, and some of them think that the pace of change is not fast enough. But so what are your views on that? And finally, you must answer this question, which is, what do you see your role as? I mean, is it problem solving, or is it environmental protection? Like, is it a combination? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, speed of change. Great question. I think the UK has suffered from a stagnation of momentum, and now we've got this window of opportunity, a culmination of many stars aligning possibly that could really inspire change. So I'm hoping that a 25-year environment strategy and a 25-year waste and resources strategy will have quite a significant impact in the next 5 years. I think that's the step change that I'm most interested in, is the next 5-year period. Because if we don't make that kind of progress, then, the aspirational stuff just drags on slowly in the background. And, I've been in the sector and I can remember it going from 10% recycling to 50% recycling. So I've seen significant change in 20-something years. But I think now is a time to really ramp up that speed of change. But there's politicians and decision makers beyond me involved. And, for all the best will in the world, there's a process that happens that may decide that some of that is, not deliverable or not cost effective in the short term. So my job is to help try and promote the right things and help work around some of those difficulties to say, well, experience over here suggests we could deliver it in this way and still get the outcome that you want. So I'm helping bring SUEZ experience from Scandinavia. I'm helping bring SUEZ experience from France, interestingly from Australia, on deposit return schemes. So, one of my jobs is still to be that consultant in the room, if you like, to think outside the UK box and go, well, what if you did it like this? We know we've worked in that type of environment. The other thing I think that is changing rapidly is technology. And I think the power of data for real-time solutions and the ability to switch plants into different modes depending on feedstock quality, that's something we're going to see more of. So the Rubicons of the US and real-time collection services, pay as you throw, or carbon accounting to enable you to pay by what you throw. I think all of that is possibly just around the corner. And maybe that would be part of that evolutionary step change that the UK needs, is a slightly different set of metrics that enable us to be more innovative in what we do, because we're such a weight-based system, everything else is irrelevant. And some of the future of deposit return, extended producer responsibility, novel end markets and materials might need us to think more like carbon and less about tonnage. So that'll be the big thing for me the next 5 years. And what's my role in that, apart from being a bit of a consultant to both the CEO, government, and our key target markets? I suppose I'm a voice. I'm a communicator. I get to put some of this out through blogs, little insights on trips I've been to, things I've seen, ideas I like, and actually I'm finding that they're almost as powerful as sitting in government working groups, because I put a message out and suddenly there's 200 retweets of something that they like, and before you know it, I've got 2 government ministers commenting on something I've seen 5 minutes earlier. And actually, I think that the future of our sector is as much about our ability to communicate and share as it is about novel new technology. And I think that the platform of social media, alongside face-to-face meetings, conferences, working groups and workshops, etc., don't get me wrong, they're still valuable, but it's just enabling us to have different conversations with different sectors in different countries, and it's real, and it's now, and we can take something away from it, and we can go and try and implement it very quickly, and we don't have to wait for the conference proceedings. We don't have to wait for the one event in a year where we get to share ideas. it's now, it's real, it's happening. You know, everybody's doing something on their way to work and going, what about this? I love the innovation that is now potentially open in our sector globally, and I think we should embrace that and encourage it. And you know, the engineers and thinkers of tomorrow, and the waste managers and resource managers of the next millennia, bring it on. I think it's going to be interesting times.
Wonderful, thank you so much, Adam. And talking about communications, I mean, BeWasteWise has been, you know, at trying to do better communications, better knowledge dissemination in the sector for about, you know, for a long time now. It seems like a long time. So friends, Adam mentioned knowledge sharing from Australia. We have Juan Levitsky, who's the decision maker in Southern Australia when it comes to waste management. We've recorded multiple interviews with him, so go look it up. He actually talks about how they implemented the bottle refund system. So it was very interesting. I learned a lot from it. So do look it up and then learn from him. Other than that, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. We have a few more minutes. I'll ask you to close, close with some, end with some closing remarks. But friends, so next week we have Kyle Wiens, who's a hero in the Right to Repair movement. So do join us then. And we also have some announcements. We've started a partnership with the International Solid Waste Association to make their knowledge more accessible. And we had our first webinar yesterday with Antonis Mavropoulos and David Biderman of SWANA. And we will have 5 more events scheduled throughout the rest of the year. So please follow us. And as we speak, we're also designing partnerships with the Asian Development Bank and also with Waste Aid UK. So there'll be more content, more good content that you can learn from and stay updated with. So please follow us and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. Also, look up Adam Reed and his good work. He tweets a lot, I should say, on Twitter. Follow him there. I think it's wonderful to see professionals within the waste industry using social media. And one thing that we have to understand here is when it comes to communications, if we look at the history of communications, even when we start with the printing press or with the internet or TV, each one of these innovations just made the speed, the communication speed faster. But the main purpose of it hasn't changed much, which is, getting together with people, sharing ideas, and then doing something together. And so social media and online video are the new technologies here. So we should use them to, leverage the power, their power. So Adam, do you have any final comments? And with that, we can end the conversation.
Well, yeah, absolute pleasure to have been invited. I think I've been lucky over my career. I've had people that I've been able to ask advice of from the CIWM, from ISWA, and you mentioned Vaughan, who was a client of mine for many years, and I think soaking up that information and joining the dots of different cultures and different systems has really, really enabled me to take on the type of role that I've got now, which is, a bit of a brand ambassador, but also somebody that helps solve problems from one geography to another. And I think, everybody out there should give a bit of their time to support others. So I mentor through the ISWA graduate program, for example, and we should all embrace the opportunity to share our experiences and enable the next generation to see what we've seen and build on it. So communication is important, but listening's far more important, and encouraging is absolutely fundamental. So be on your way and have a good weekend, people.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam. Thanks, friends. Thanks for joining us, and see you guys next week. All right. Bye.